I don't think it's bad to step back a little bit and do some thinking and reflecting before we act. And it seems like we're sort of pushed to act, move, move, move. May
Right.
1st is coming up. We gotta keep going. Like, and where is that coming from? I don't know. Is it like internal or is it an external pressure to? I mean, like.
Well,
Oh, go ahead.
I mean, as far as act, I mean, I think part of the issue is that we need to sort of we feel this compulsion to keep grabbing attention, and so um,
Yeah, but then we're not sort of like the whole winter. We've been less and less and less. We've been sort of falling off the radar.
and that's another thing is that I mean I think people are feeling that we're sort of getting pushed off. We're sort of pushing ourselves off to the side, and at the same time, it's sort of like this winter thing where you kind of hibernate a bit and you get antsy toward the end, and so you want to do things. But as far as the movement resources group thing, I mean, I really think that, I mean, for me, I mean, it's possible that we can work on something more democratic on the side, but I think, if we can, I think the more effective thing to do would be to draw resources off of them so that they can't do what they want to do.
I that's what I like is like the people who aren't like so ideologically like hardline. Like that's what I find that they do is they find a creative way to take resources from attempts to co-opt the movement without sacrificing their values.
Right.
And I think they did that in Rhode Island or somewhere where like they got a community center. They said if you don't shut down this community center or if you open one up or something, we will leave the park. But with the caveat that we're not speaking for the movement and people can still stay in the park. So basically got the best of both worlds. Like people can still stay in the park if they want, but we'll say we'll leave the park. But try to get something out of it. Because I figure they're going to evict us anyways. Why not try to get something for the community? And that's sort of what you said. The Movement Resources Group is going to go ahead anyways.
Right.
Why not try to get some of that money? And that's where like I guess that just takes a mature discussion of like tactics. Well, but that I'd feel more comfortable if we actually had an accepted understanding of our values. So I'm just afraid that like it's the opposition Movement Resources Group is a lot more organized as far as their strategy and what they want to achieve, and we're not. So when we interact, their narrative is definitely going to dominate ours because we're not having these types of discussions Occupy wide. Really,
Right.
I don't see it.
Well, and that's why you want to start having this sort of discussion, and and I mean to some extent that's what that meeting I attended was about. It was trying to figure out what are the shared values of movement, and I mean obviously they're slanted in the opposite direction that I am, but I mean that's definitely a conversation worth having, and that's sort of I think in good faith what a lot of them want to do.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, it's hard to remember that we're all supposed to be working in good faith, right?
Yeah.
So it's not maliciousness. It's just.
Yeah, and I don't want to to malign their characters or anything. I mean, there was one guy who kind of rubbed me the wrong way, but I think he's just very frustrated because he wants to do certain things, and the movement as a whole isn't behind what he wants to do, and so it's.
Well, dude, that's why I hope some of my stories like sort of shed light on that because I totally like flamed out on people on the internet, calling them all sorts of names. Someone called me like the Holden. They said, "What are you, the Holden Caulfield of the Occupy movement?" Acting like a catcher in the rye, dude. Just yelling at people, and then I backed out. I was like, maybe I should back out and try to think more about what's going on. I'm getting too. You get frustrated living this, and living on the streets and like being so involved and like. And then, like, when they kick you out of churches and say they're going to cut back on the food and you don't get a MetroCard and then I got, like, $100 ticket for jumping a turnstile, like, what the fuck am I even doing here? And so many people say that. Yeah. Like your buddies. And then you just say, well, fuck it, I'm out.
Right.
And it only took them, challenging their tent and stuff.
Yeah.
So I know so many people who are just like, I'm gone, and then they just take off. They're crazy. And that's what I'm worried about is we're creating, like, some more of a modern culture. We have this, like, cool diversity of, like, a diverse ecology of thought and a convergence zone in Zuccotti of all these different crazy people. You just walk apart, awesome conversations, and then we're seeing like a purge sort of ideologically and a gentrification, where like people are questioning anarchist ideas and tactics, and we really have to be blatantly non-violent and don't even use the word anarchism. And then gentrification. It's like, well, if you can't support yourself, if you can't get your own food and your own housing, you shouldn't be here. You should be working on your own life. And it's like, well, you might support that because you're a part-time guy who like comes here of your own accord, but we had a really I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? On the gentrification in the movement since we're cutting down housing options and stuff?
Well, I mean, you know, it's hard and to. I mean, so much of the movement's resources have gone toward housing people and feeding people and giving people Metro cards, and I mean, even just not from the perspective of somebody who, I mean, you know, one of the things that we used to talk about in our hearts is like, you know, there's all this money going towards food when these people could be dumpster diving themselves, and
Yeah.
you know, these people could. I mean, you know, it's
Yeah.
not even a matter of wanting or tolerating gentrification. It's just a matter of, you know, I mean, from an anarchist perspective, you've got to do some of this yourself.
Yeah.
You've got to figure out where you're staying. You've got to figure out where you're going to get your food, and you know, you don't have to go out and get a job and you know, work or anything necessarily, but I mean, there's a ton of food that's being thrown out on the street every day in New York City. You can go ahead and you can dig through the trash and you can get that yourself. You don't need to show up at 60 Wall and be fed.
That's what I realized when like they denied me a MetroCard a couple weeks ago. I was like, I started just asking, and I realized like just today, first person I asked swiped me in.
Right.
It's like it happens all the time, and then if you realize that, and then you go out to dumpster with people, living with that like for free, eating hot dogs every day basically, but like you get some awesome stuff, you know. Like,
Yeah. And like even I mean you know even if like instead of doling out Metro cards, they bought everybody a bike.
Yeah.
From the beginning. I mean, that would have been a smarter use of the resources because then you're not continually paying out. You're not contributing to the city. But you're giving everybody here. Get yourself around.
That's what's sort of tough is like you know inherently there's something you disagree with, and then like that's what like at first I was yelling at people like, man, you should totally be taking care of people because you want to represent that the populace, like you see like disadvantaged people and underprivileged, and you're like, well, their voices should be heard, and I talk to them and they're angry, but then the opposite side of it is the rational just idea that, well, if there's smarter ways to do things and how we're doing them, and just by, and it's weird because so my critique of how, and this isn't even against directed at anyone, maybe just we haven't done this right or we're learning, is it seems like they're doing the worst of all options. So they're not prioritizing taking care of people's needs, but then when they do take care of people's needs, they do it in the most inefficient way possible. So it's like you're shutting down the churches on purpose. I stayed at one, and it's like they purposely closed it, and it was horrible, sabotaged it, and I wrote a little bit about it. And then the Metro cards is like they're buying these weekly things, and it's like no, even just the basic thing. If you're gonna spend this much money, let's do it on a monthly basis or something stupid, or like the bikes or whatever. And then like so the very beginning of Occupy, how we handled resources, they instituted. This is what turned me on to anarchism, because I was like, why did we institute these structures from the beginning that just seemed illogical, like standing working groups? And I started criticizing those working groups by reading a corporate book called The New Meeting Standard by someone who's trying to revolutionize corporate meetings. And I started reading that, and I thought, wow, Occupy is behind the corporate culture who are trying to get rid of these informational standing meetings as like just the anathema. Like the worst thing you can do is have an informational meeting. Send a memo and be done with it. And yet from the beginning of Occupy, you know an informational meeting because as a reoccurring time, like just like our working group meetings every time. And if you go there and you could pretty much been summarized, if you just hand out information. Like the point of a meeting is, there's only a couple different meetings. The point of it pretty much is to make a decision. Now you have a couple different types of meetings other than a decision-making meeting, but that's usually the common one. You have brainstorming, which is a completely different structure, and it's just creativity. It doesn't even have to be in like a structured meeting setting. A work session, where me and you are working on a project with shared skills, or a one-on-one communication, just conversation right now, or the decision meeting. It's like, and maybe there's another one. But like if you look at us, we shove those all, and that's even a criticism of CT. Shove them all into one meeting. So now you have all these different objectives. And the hardest thing is to try to do a brainstorming while you're trying to do a decision meeting, because decision meeting needs to be very directed because you have a point, an objective, and it's measured by how efficient you were at arriving at that decision. Brainstorming is completely opposite. Efficiency is out the window. You want to just throw spaghetti out the wall and see what sticks. And it's complete. And there's actually really good groups out there in the corporate world who are working on just becoming innovative brainstorming groups, and they'll come into a corporation and teach them how to brainstorm efficiently by getting rid of all this other stuff and allowing creativity to flourish. And that's an engine of growth in any innovative company, is during your brainstorming sessions, you could create a backlog of innovation and great ideas, and then you filter them through your processes to try to create products. And Google says like 30% of every one of their employees' time they want spent on brainstorming and creative ideas, and they want to keep that engine. And that's what like, and we're like a movement. We call ourselves a revolution, and yet we're being more formal and structured and like puritanical than the corporate culture. That's sad. And then you read this book, and it's funny the opposite way too, because meeting guy talks about revolution and blah blah blah, and he's talking about just like more efficient capitalism, but like his language is more like our language, and our processes are more like their processes. But like so where did that come from? Why do we have working groups? Why did they have $100 standing budget a day? Why did these things start in Occupy? I was trying to figure that out. Like, you don't know because you're tangential. But working groups aren't an anarchist idea, but yet we got them from like other movements. I guess Spain started this working group idea. Like, you know a little bit about anarchy associations, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way anarchies associate are like affinity groups, they call them, not working groups.
Right.
And that's, if you look at the language of Occupy, we bastardize a lot of this. Like, affinity groups and anarchist associations are people with an affinity, a shared interest, right? Organized around a direct action, something with a purpose.
Right.
If you have a longer purpose or a larger group, you create a collective, right?
Well,
Or
sure. I mean, well, a collective could be a collection of affinity groups. Yeah.
It's something bigger though, and then also maybe that has like a longer timeline.
Yes.
So like it's not just for a direct action. And then you have General Assembly and Spokes Council are ways that you associate to come to decisions in a direct democracy way. In Occupy, we created working groups, which like anarchists don't like even work. And they're standing meetings every week. We gave them standing budgets, which is going to entrench a bureaucracy because we gave them a little bit of power. Totally unchecked, you know.
Mm-hmm.
If we haven't even audited where all that money went. And then what we call affinity groups are outside money that doesn't have to abide by our standards and processes. So I don't even know why they call it, well, I guess in the loosest sense of the term.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, there, especially in the beginning when the occupation was still there, you did have, you know, the logistical groups, the kitchen, the library, the comfort, which became SIS, and sanitation, medics. I mean, these are things that
normally would be in like an anarchist organization, or?
Well, I mean, they were just sort of practical necessities of operating the occupation, and so I mean, it sort of made sense to have ongoing groups for at least those tasks because those were ongoing things that had to be done just routinely, just housekeeping.
Now, if they were organized more along the lines of collectives or cooperatives, then maybe they would have been more democratic and transparent, or maybe that would have helped solve like the little power bottlenecks that we noticed.
Well, I mean, I think, you know, part of the power bottlenecks would just be the fact that, you know, some people were more willing and more available to do things than others, and so I mean, if you're more involved in a particular project,
It comes down to human nature.
You know, where